Good morning, everyone. Today we are here talking about protecting profitability, crime prevention strategies for hospitality businesses. We're going to be joined by Renee Rhodes, a crime prevention, I wrote it down in the wrong spot, hospitality client risk advisor, and Trent Holloway, a risk control specialist from IMA, which is part of which is partnered with Parker Smith Peak. As a little housekeeping, if you want to ask a question, we will go ahead and type it down in the Q&A section of your Zoom screen, and we can answer those on air. And this will be recorded, but if you want to take a look at the slideshow, then reach out to Melissa Holtzclaw and Logan Dozier. I'm going to introduce Logan here in a second, and they can get that in for you so that you can take a look at the slides. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Logan Dozier from Washington Hospitality Association. Good morning, Logan.
Good morning, Lisa, and thank you for the introduction. As Lisa mentioned, my name is Logan Dozier. I'm the Senior Manager of Insurance Services here at the Washington Hospitality Association, and we are so glad to bring this to you through My Hospitality Insurance. For those that do not know about My Hospitality Insurance, we started this program 5 years ago on the bedrock of bringing hospitality professionals to the industry and helping, whether that be through savings or risk reduction or many other things. We provide a full service from your property, your casualty, auto, and much more. If you are interested in learning more about the program and how it can benefit you come renewal time, which, knock on wood, start early as we're telling everyone, please reach out to your territory manager, myself, or visit myhospitalityinsurance.com. With that, I will introduce one of our close partners here that's been with the program and helped advise many of our members throughout the association far and wide. Melissa Holtzclaw, please take it away.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Thank you for joining us today for our discussion on crime and protecting profitability for our hospitality members. As Logan said, my name is Melissa Holtzclaw, and I specialize in providing risk management and commercial insurance solutions for a range of hospitality clients throughout the U.S. Pretty much today, we're going to go over a high-level overview of the most common crimes we're seeing throughout the industry right now, and what our clients are currently facing, as well as what prevention steps you can take to protect your business, employees, and your customers. With that, I'm excited to announce two of our risk control specialists, Renee Rhodes and Trenton Holloway. Renee has over 25 years of experience as a risk control advisor. Renee specializes in programs focused in the hospitality industry, helping identify exposures to loss affecting organizations' bottom line. Renee is very critical in helping our clients with implementation of safety and loss prevention programs, conducting site evaluations, developing training seminars, and much more. Trenton Holloway has been part of our IMA risk control team since 2019, and he specializes specifically in hospitality as well. And he focuses on building safety programs, OSHA inspections, compliance, and on-site safety for our hotel, family entertainment, restaurant, and casino clients. And with that, I will turn it over to them.
Good morning. We are very happy to be here and join you all to go through this presentation regarding profitability. I know a lot of what Melissa said about Trent and my background can be summed up into a couple of words. Basically, our role is to work with our account on reducing the costs of your insurance premiums. So we spend the majority of our time out in the field working with our hospitality clients, making sure that they have all of the resources and tools they need to reduce the potential for insurance claims. So with that said, we'll go ahead and get started. And as we go through, feel free to ask questions. Melissa's going to interrupt us throughout and let us know what your questions are. So please don't feel like you have to hold them to the end. So one of the first things that we need to do when we're deciding what our risks are that need to be addressed is understanding the risks that we have, identifying the risks, identifying the hazards, and the best way to do that. And Trent and I start this way with every account that we work with, and we perform a thorough assessment looking at all of their policies and procedures. We review accident reports and insurance loss reports, loss runs. Some other things to look at when you're performing assessment is to identify any injury trends that you have maybe seen in the past or liability situations that have been reported. And also look into guest comments or complaints that you've received to make sure that we're addressing all of those areas. We want to, perform that thorough walkthrough of the facility, identifying any hazards or areas of concern. Sometimes you have some risks that maybe keep you up at night, and we want to make sure that we are addressing those in the assessment process. Another thing that we look at that has become vitally important, not just in accident investigations, but also determining compensability with a lot of our insurance claims. We rely on the video surveillance. Surveillance is so important and provides a lot of really good detailed information about incidents when they happen. So it's critical that we identify, do we have video surveillance inside, outside, and also look at, we pay a lot of money for the CCTV. We want to make sure that all of our cameras are operational. So look at that, make sure that everything is operational. Look for any blind spots that you might have around the property or inside the restaurant. We also want to do a full evaluation of cash management procedures. And this can look at a lot of different things. A lot of the restaurants that I work with rely on managers to take daily deposits to the bank. And so we want to make sure that we do have some written guidelines in place and evaluate how those cash deposits are being handled. And are we going once a day, twice a day, certain days of the week? We do see that because we are primarily working towards a cashless environment, that sometimes we're not having to go to the bank quite as often as we have in the past. So review the cash management procedures that you currently have in place. Figure out where we have some deficiencies or gaps, and come up with solutions. We want to look at our alarm system, panic buttons. Do we have panic buttons in a number of areas that are easily accessible for our employees in an emergency situation? And then take a look at our SOPs, policies, procedures, and make sure that we're addressing all of these areas of concern. Identify, how can we mitigate or reduce the potential of incidents based on the hazards that we have our employees exposed to. So if you're needing assistance in reviewing some of those policies and procedures, that is a lot of what Trent and I do. So we'd be happy to work with you to identify and maybe help revise or update some policies and procedures. We want to make sure. Yes, go ahead.
One question real quick, Renee, and that is do operators gain risk if they don't have security cameras on premise or alarm systems?
So I don't know that you would necessarily gain risk, but I will tell you that with the hard insurance market that we're in right now, we are seeing that a lot of the insurance carriers are requiring that our accounts have video surveillance inside and outside both of the facility.
And one thing I'll add to that is that we're also seeing where part of what our loss control does is build a story of the systems that are in place. And so sometimes, even if it's maybe be penalized for not having, it is something that can be a bonus to have and can reflect premiums as well.
Absolutely. So we want to look at, do we have backdoor alarms in place? Working around the restaurant industry for, 25 plus years, one of the things that's definitely been a trend is that majority of the robberies that happen with restaurants happen through the back door. And primarily that is because, as we're taking trash in and out, we have a tendency to prop that door open. And so, in these robbery situations, these individuals that are committing the robberies, they spend a significant amount of time reviewing your day-to-day operations, getting to know your good habits, your bad habits. And one of the worst things that we can do is prop that back door open. So we want to make sure that we have alarms in place, that the door goes automatically shut and locks, that it is secured when someone exits the building. And, for easy access getting back in, depending on like a quick serve restaurant, we ask that they walk around to the front to get back in to the building. But if you want them to access the back door, maybe have keypad access where they punch in a code to unlock that door and be able to access through that back door. We also see some trends of theft of product, food product going out the back door. So I always recommend having some kind of an alarm on the back door to let you know when that door is opened and when people are going in and out the back door. So part of the assessment process is making sure that we have a protocol in place for access to our doors. If we have key locks, then we need to make sure that we are having employees that are terminated return those keys, or if it's keypad access, however you guys secure your doors. If it's keypad access, we need to make sure that when an employee is terminated, those codes are redone for access for any of the existing employees. We want to evaluate any potential security issues that we might have on the property. Look at the lighting, evaluate lighting inside and outside. One of the things, and we're going to talk about the homeless and transient situation that we have going on. The lighting outside the building is extremely beneficial when you're dealing with homelessness. And then sometimes we may need to prevent access to certain areas inside the facility and limit that to certain individuals. For instance, the area where we're storing our liquor, you could use key card access or some kind of a locking device on those doors, and make sure that, again, when employment is terminated, that we change access for that. One of the biggest parts of preventing risk in the restaurant industry, and it really doesn't matter whether it's risk related to crime or just basic safety in general, employee training is a huge part of that. And I will just kind of give you an example. I had a client within the past year that they own a lot of apartment buildings, and one of the apartment buildings in the management office, and a tenant came in to discuss his past due rent, and the conversation got a little heated. He left the management office, came back with a gun, and shot and killed the property manager. So one of the things through the investigation process of that incident and OSHA coming in, they were deemed and written up for not providing adequate employee training for workplace violence, and for also not having a workplace violence written policy in place for our employees to understand what's expected of them, and how we prevent situations from happening. And then one of the other areas that we definitely need to dig into and evaluate is vendor deliveries and vendor services. We rely on a lot of vendors to provide goods and services, and sometimes they are accessing our property after hours when we're not open. And so we need to make sure that we're evaluating the vendors that we're utilizing. I call it qualifying our contractors or the vendors that we work with. And that is making sure that they have adequate insurance coverage in place, whether it's, liability insurance, workers' compensation. So we want to have them provide documentation of their insurance and make sure that we're named as an insured. If they don't have workers' compensation insurance, then if one of their employees is injured on our property, we would be responsible for covering the injuries of that employee. So we want to, again, qualify those vendors, make sure that they're performing background checks on their employees. Because if those employees are accessing our facilities after hours, we want to make sure they're individuals that don't have any type of a police record. Again, another example, I had one of my quick serve restaurants. They have a vendor that comes in after hours late at night to clean and service the hood exhaust system. And one morning they noticed that the petty cash bag was missing. And they looked back on the video surveillance and identified that it was the individual performing the cleaning of the hood exhaust system that stole the petty cash bag. So we want to make sure that we are very selective about who we allow into our facilities when they are not monitored full time.
One more question, Renee.
Sure.
And I have some opinions on this, but I'll let you start, which is, can't cameras in some places, i.e. pool areas, become a liability because they are not monitored 24/7? And is therefore, if there's a situation that a person's having an issue and possibly drowns, and it seems that it comes down to some type of litigation that can happen because a human was not watching the cameras.
You're exactly right. It can become a liability if we have cameras in our pool area, in our workout facility area, and they are not monitored. So we want to make sure that if we are going to have cameras in those areas, that they know that it's recording and it is not monitored. So again, it's that communication piece.
And one of the other things about that is, one thing that we'll talk about later is third-party contracts and vendors and kind of the risk transfer that's involved in that. So sometimes having a company that's doing the monitoring for you is the best way to go for areas that maybe are of higher concern.
Absolutely. So after we've completed the thorough assessment, we need to go through and look at things that were identified in that assessment process and come up with a corrective plan, a corrective action plan, and set a timeline for when those items will be corrected. Some of them can be quick fixes, and we want to go through and look at those quick fixes and assign a responsible party to make sure that those items are getting fixed in a timely manner. Some of the items that were identified during the assessment process may be larger budget items. For instance, if we determine that we need to hire an outside contractor for security on the property exterior throughout the nighttime and overnight hours, that may be something that we need to look at putting some dollars into the budget. So those are not quite the overnight fix type situations, but we can put on the agenda of things to discuss and figure out a timeline of when we can implement some changes regarding security or whatever it is that may need to be looked into. So look at some of those larger areas, and if you've done the assessment yourself, that's where you can reach out to loss control or a risk advisor to help give you solutions to mitigate some of these items that were detected during the assessment process. And then we want to make sure that we're communicating with everyone at the facility that understands we found some deficiencies, make sure that we're communicating how we're correcting those issues. Or if someone has made put a complaint in regarding a certain situation, we need to make sure that we're responding to that. We're not going to correct every single issue that maybe involves a complaint, whether it's from a guest or from an employee or an associate. But if it's something that can't be corrected or corrected in a timely manner, we need to make sure that we communicate that. So that individual knows that we are addressing the issue and we have taken it into consideration. So looking at some of the things that we can do to help prevent situations, crime situations, theft, whether it's an outside party, inside theft. There's a lot of things that we can do. As I mentioned, we are slowly moving to a cashless society. And I have seen quick serve restaurants that I was in New Mexico last year and ran into some restaurants that on their signage before you enter the restaurant, it says, we only accept cards. We do not accept cash. And that gives you a little bit of peace of mind that you're not going to have the robbery situations come up when you don't have any cash on hand, because that is exactly what they're looking for in those situations. They're looking for, are you managing your cash appropriately, and how can they get access to that cash? And a lot of times the robberies that are committed in a lot of our quick serve restaurants and in the hospitality industry either come from an existing employee, a previous employee, or maybe an acquaintance or family member of an existing or previous employee. So they have a certain amount of knowledge about your cash management procedures, whether they're good or bad. So kind of keep that in mind. So we want to make sure that we have protocols in place to detect credit card fraud, and make sure that we're, checking our equipment regularly, looking for skimmers. Sometimes they can be put into place by outside individuals, or it could be someone working inside the restaurant or the hospitality business. Again, making sure that we are going through that qualification process for our vendors before we allow them access to the property. Performing background checks on our prospective employees, especially when we're talking about hotels. These are individuals, especially in the housekeeping department, that we are allowing to have access to guest rooms and guests' belongings. So we want to make sure that we are performing thorough background checks on housekeeping, the engineering department, maintenance department, before they have access to some of those areas inside the facility. Look to determine, do we need to make some changes to our cash management procedures? We are seeing that there are more businesses out there that are moving towards using a more secured cash management system like Loomis, Gardas, or Brinks. And that really limits the amount of exposure to cash within our businesses, because the only individuals that can get into those safes are the employees working for that organization that we have hired to manage that. Sure, go ahead.
One more question regarding kind of just protocols and stuff around not just like cash, but credit cards. What is your thoughts on, as far as what I've seen a few claims that are regarding, maybe an employee that is canceling out a transaction and then pocketing the cash? Is that, or how do you have set protocols and stuff around that, as far as managers who are allowed to do those things? Are those best practices that you would recommend?
Absolutely. First and foremost, you want to have a policy in place about how you're going to handle canceled tickets. And they do need to be investigated to figure out what was the reason for the canceled ticket. And then is it something that you have to have management approval to handle the cancellation of that ticket? So again, that kind of goes under cash management. And when you put a policy in place, it needs to address canceled tickets. Daily deposits have always been an issue, especially when we have employees like managers, supervisors taking those deposits to the bank. We hear all kinds of stories about restaurants that have experienced theft. Could be just one day's bank deposits. It could be, we had a situation with a client where it was 2 weeks worth of bank deposits that did not go into the bank. Here where I live in Kansas, we had a small suburb outside of Wichita that was a quick serve restaurant, and I think they did arrest the general manager, but I think they determined that he had stolen about $27,000 worth of deposits. So we want to make sure that we have a protocol in place, and make sure that somebody is tracking, monitoring, auditing those deposits on a regular basis. And then if we have cash on hand, for instance, I mentioned the petty cash bag that my quick serve restaurant had at their facility. Make sure that we are monitoring that petty cash and have a checks and balance system in place when money is taken out or money is put in. So we're monitoring that petty cash system. And then again, I can't say enough about the video surveillance inside, outside, making sure that we're, monitoring all of the cameras so that they're operational.
And Renee, a few comments on that came up in the chat that maybe we can get your thoughts on. And that is that somebody said that alarms, they don't feel that they really do a whole lot of prevention when a bad actor is motivated. And so also, how useful are they? Because sometimes, people are caught on them. Is it more helpful for after the fact, identifying who was involved? Because is it much of a deterrent, or is it more of a tool for seeing who was actually being able to have an accurate picture of what happened?
So I will tell you, in the claims handling process, we rely heavily on that video footage. I'll give you an example of a casino that I work with. They had an incident where an individual said that they fell in the restroom and experienced an injury to their leg. We didn't have knowledge of the injury right away. So we had to go back and rely on that video footage. And one of the things that we'll talk about is the amount of time that you retain that footage, because it needs to be a significant amount of time before it's taped over. So in the investigation process, after we received notification from this person's attorney regarding the incident and their injuries, the security team went back and reviewed the footage. And obviously in a restroom situation, we can't have videos in the restrooms. So we rely on the video footage outside of the restrooms. They went as far as looking at the footage in the parking lot from the time that person exited their vehicle, walked into the facility, and that person was already walking with a limp when they entered the facility from the parking lot. So there was a pre-existing injury in place, and they were claiming that the injury happened at our property. That's something that prevented, probably about anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000 claim. By having that video footage, we were able to deny that claim. So it really does help. One of the other areas that it helps significantly with our employees are employment practices liability issues. So if we have harassment or bullying going on in the restaurant or in our hospitality business, we can detect that with our video surveillance that helps through that investigation process. I hope that answers the question.
And now we're going to talk about a few strategies to deter vandalism and auto break-ins. So some crime prevention strategies. First and foremost, what we normally like to do is just raise awareness for all of our employees. So one thing we can talk about is just crime trends that are going on in the local area, just making sure all of our employees are aware of what's going on. Also, this is a great time for our employees to speak up and let everyone else know what they've seen. And this could be something that we consider a near miss, where there's almost been an incident, but an incident didn't occur. So that way everyone's on the same awareness level and they have an idea of what's going on. Also too, if we can, we'd like to establish a good relationship with our local police departments. And this is something where if we can have some local police come in, this is a great training opportunity for any de-escalation training, active shooter training, anything like that. But first, if we can, establishing a good relationship with our local police department. Now, if you're in an area where the local police isn't responding to certain crimes, for example, I've got a hotel client that is dealing with auto break-ins almost daily. It's a very regular occurrence. This is something where if we do notice a trend and police isn't taking action, we want to try and put some risk control measures in place just to try and stop this trend from happening. So one of our recommendations we made was getting a third-party security firm on site or a virtual security guard in place as well too, to kind of help deter some of these auto break-ins. Because once we notice the trend, that's where we get set up for a huge lawsuit potentially coming down the road. And so with the third-party security firms, with this, we'd like to just make sure that they are present on site, they are known. And if they are doing outside walkarounds, we want to try and make sure that they do switch up their walk around time, switch up their route every once in a while, so it just doesn't become a routine as well. And then with the virtual security guard, so like the example, the picture I've got on my slide here, it's a trailer mounted security, virtual security guard, and these cameras are monitored 24/7. And then with this specific unit here, it does have a loudspeaker, so if someone is monitoring it and they do see some activity going on, there is a loudspeaker they can come on, play an alarm, or come over and say the police is being notified of the accident or the incident as well too. I've got some pricing on this too, if you want to reach out to, but a unit like this for a lease would be about $1,500 a month, or if you'd like to purchase it, it'd be about $17,000, but this is another option as well. And then like Renee has mentioned here too, security cameras are vital for us on the insurance side as well. And then also another option too is we could partner with other local businesses as well too. So if we could look at getting into a business improvement district where we partner with other businesses around and we pay a fee towards the city, and then that can help out with more cleanup and safety and security from the local police department as well too.
One thing I want to interject really quick is that I went to a seminar recently for security in the hospitality industry. And one of the things that they mentioned that's a huge benefit for a lot of restaurants and hotel properties is to reach out to the community policing station. Sometimes you can get better response and involvement from the neighborhood or community policing station rather than just calling the main police department for assistance, because these police departments are overwhelmed right now. And so they won't come out a lot of times unless there is injuries or, it's a life-threatening situation. So we can rely on those neighborhood or community police departments to help out in those situations.
And then getting a little more in depth on security cameras and placement of security cameras. So again, one thing we want to make sure is we don't have any blind spots on our property and our property is fully secured. as well. And then again, we mentioned the virtual security guards. So a system that is being monitored 24/7 by a third party. And then they do have a loudspeaker too. If they do notice anything, they can come over on the loudspeaker as well too and notify that. One thing we normally like to recommend too is having a 60 to 90 day video retention on our security system as well too, because like Renee mentioned, a lot of times what we see is claims come through and it's could be 45, 60, 90 days later after the fact. And if our system only holds 30 days to 2 weeks, we can't go back and fully review the footage as well. So this helps out quite a bit with our accident investigation procedures as well. So normally we like to recommend a 60 to 90 day video retention. And then making sure we install our security cameras that are at least 8 feet off the ground so that avoids them being tampered with too by individuals. Some instances it's not able to happen, but we at least like to try and get them at least 8 feet off the ground. And then specifically to the state of Washington, what we want to do is avoid audio cameras. So the Washington state requires consent from both parties to be recorded for audio purposes or record conversations. So one thing in the state of Washington, we'd like to avoid audio cameras there. One of my casinos I've been working with, they've been dealing with auto break-ins as well too, and they installed license plate readers. And this has been a big help to prevent auto break-ins after the fact too. It was a couple frequent flyers that were breaking into vehicles on property, and so they installed these license plate readers and were able to get that to the police and then get those frequent flyers taken care of there as well. And then some landscaping and lighting solutions too. So normally what we like to suggest is trying to keep landscaping at a height to where someone driving on the road can easily see, or if our employees are inside, they can easily see outside. So normally we like to try and keep any bushes or shrubs at least 3 feet or lower anyway. That way we can see there, and then at least keep trees trimmed at least 8 feet high too. So again, we can keep that easy visibility from the road. Also the exterior lighting, making sure that's bright and covers all the outdoor areas too. Just so we can, or just so it clearly lights up the parking lot. Motion sensor lighting is another great option there too. This is another easy way to see if someone is walking outside and it picks up on the motion, they can easily detect that. Also, what we like to recommend is exterior lighting be on a timer or a light sensor system, because what we've seen in the past too is if it's a manual turn on system, sometimes the lighting tends to not get turned on or forgets to get turned on until later in the night too. So making sure it is on a timer or sensor program as well.
And the other side of that is that when we have time changes in the areas of the country that do have time changes, if they're not on a sensor, then when the time changes, the lighting may not come on until a significant amount of time after dark.
One quick follow-up question. Are you able to provide the information for the virtual camera that was shown? Is it a
Yes,
specific?
absolutely.
feature?
Yeah, we can provide that.
Okay.
All right, and then protecting against theft, hotels specifically. So like Renee mentioned before, background checks for our employees and then vendors performing our services. And this is specific to anyone that has access to the back of the house or the hotel, or any employees that are entering hotel rooms or handling any financials as well too. And then another measure too is just having a formalized key card policy and making sure we're following those policies and procedures as well too. So if an individual does come up and they say they have lost their hotel key or left it in the room, just ensuring that we are checking their ID and then verifying that they are in this specific room that they're requested to. And then routine door checks during housekeeping as well. One of my clients I was just at recently, if you didn't slam the door shut, the door would be jarred open. So you'd leave the room and it would be open. This made it an easy way for people to get into rooms that weren't supposed to be in rooms. So making sure if when we're doing our housekeeping, If we do notice any doors that aren't locking properly, getting that on a maintenance request and getting those fixed as soon as possible. Also another
more
thing.
Question, sorry
Go
to
ahead.
interrupt. We talk a lot about policies and procedures, and what I see is that a lot of times when somebody's new, maybe it's gone over and then maybe not for a while. How often should these policies and procedures be reviewed so that way then employees are aware? I know specifically around new technology, there's also some times where things can be overlooked, but what would you consider best practices?
I would consider best practice for safety and security policies to have those reviewed on an annual basis. And those are things that can, in our daily or weekly stand-ups, like in the hotel, cover one of those each week, as kind of a refresher. Obviously, it's all covered at the time of onboarding as a new employee, but when we have those long-term employees, we want to make sure that they are reminded of what our policies are, especially when we have policies that change. We definitely, if we have an upgraded system or something new introduced to the work environment, we want to make sure that we're covering that as quickly as possible after any changes are made to policies and procedures. But on an annual basis is definitely a good time frame for a refresher.
And lastly here too, posting signage to remind guests to secure doors and door locks. So this is something where if we would have a balcony door that's on a lower level, again, Renee mentioned just having that communication piece with our customers or guests as well too. But just making sure we do have a sign up there too that reminds our guests to lock and secure doors for any balcony doors or any outside doors as well. Because a lot of those tend to be unlocked when a guest goes outside, and that creates easy access for someone to come into a room as well. So moving on to some incident reporting procedures. So if we do have an incident, first and foremost, we'd like to notify the police of any crime if there was one involved. And then after that, we'd like to get our insurance carrier notified as soon as possible. And then once carrier's notified, one thing we like to look at too is performing a detailed accident investigation instead of just documenting what happened. Through this accident investigation process, we can look at security cam footage, look at all parties involved, any manufacturers that were involved as well too. But the idea of the accident investigation is to try and stop this from becoming a trend. And then get ahead of this curve as well. And then, like I mentioned before, reviewing security footage. And it's always good to review before and after the accident as well, not just reviewing the accident, but if we can review almost up to 30 minutes before and 30 minutes after to get a good idea of what went on before and after the incident. And then if you do have a safety committee or risk security team in place too, this is a good time to sit down and discuss new ways to stop this a certain incident from becoming a trend, or if it has become a trend, implementing ways to remove or mitigate that from happening again in the future.
And also, if you have multiple locations, you want to make sure you share that information with your other locations to head off any incidents at their property as well. So I'm going to quickly just touch on workplace violence because we are seeing this being a more active trend. Right now, we have 70% of all Americans believe that violent crimes are on the rise in the United States. So it's kind of top of mind. We're seeing it every day in the news. So we want to make sure that we are addressing workplace violence. And as I mentioned, the shooting incident with my client a little earlier, that was one of the things that was a written citation from OSHA was regarding having a workplace violence policy in place and making sure that you're doing adequate training on workplace violence. So just a couple of things to kind of highlight. Identify any trends of workplace violence in your area. Make sure that we are addressing them and putting safeguards in place. Again, if you have a neighborhood association, reach out. You guys can really kind of help identify issues and help each other, hopefully reduce the potential for situations. Every employer is required to have an injury and illness prevention program. So I think a lot of people are unaware of that, and OSHA doesn't do a great job of letting employers know what they need and are required to be doing. So if you don't currently have an injury and illness prevention program in place, reach out to me. I have some for a number of different types of businesses in the hospitality realm. So I would be happy to provide you a template for that. And then we want to make sure that we're doing the, robbery, crime, and de-escalation training with our employees, making sure that we have increased staffing if we're starting to see some trends in our neighborhood, and make sure that we have a written workplace violence prevention program. This is something that OSHA is currently, there's not an OSHA regulation that requires this, but they are moving in that direction. So right now, if they wanted to cite an employer for not having a workplace violence prevention program in place, it would fall under what they call the general duty clause, which is a regulation that basically says that employers are required to provide a workplace free of hazards to ensure that their employees are safe while they're doing their job. So we need to be aware of what those requirements are under the OSHA regulations. So looking at some prevention strategies, because I think a lot of us are dealing with issues with the homeless or unhoused individuals accessing our properties. Our main focus is to create that safe and secure environment for our employees and our customers. We do need to develop and implement a transient control plan. And we're seeing issues in small cities, big cities. I was just telling Trent, I had a quick serve restaurant in a very, very small town that told me they have a small playground area and they found a homeless person sleeping inside one of the pieces of their playground equipment. So it's everywhere. It doesn't matter the size of the community that you live in or work in. So develop and implement that transient control plan. Make sure that we're training our employees, train frontline, employees how to be empathetic when dealing with the homeless. We want to make sure that in our transient control plan, we have specific expectations outlined for our employees and for them not to exceed those expectations when approaching a homeless or transient person. I've had 2 quick serve restaurants recently that had employees that were stabbed when interacting with a homeless person. So be very careful about what we are asking our employees to do and how to handle those situations, because we don't want to put anyone in a situation where they end up being injured.
And Renee,
sure, go ahead.
One thing that, in addition to, employee training and making sure people know when to step in, when not to, some of the things that are coming up is with, hypodermic needles and those being left in restrooms, and, who should be cleaning those up and what that should look like. What are your thoughts on that?
So really anyone within our organization can clean and decontaminate when we have an exposure for bloodborne pathogens. It's just that the employees must be trained, and any needles that we come across in the work environment need to be disposed of appropriately. So we can't just throw those in the trash. So if we have bio waste, we need to make sure that we're calling a vendor like Stericycle, or that we have a protocol in place for disposing of those items, like dropping them off to the local clinic or medical facility would be a way to get rid of some of those in smaller quantities.
And you had also mentioned about changing, even kind of restroom policies, so that way then it's for customers only also.
So there are some things that we can do at our facilities that help deter homeless and transient finding our property attractive. So one of the things is limiting access or restricting access to the restrooms. Maybe restricting access, Wi-Fi access, because believe it or not, a lot of these homeless or transient individuals do have access to cell phones. There are actually some states and communities that are providing cell phones for those individuals. And so they're looking for free Wi-Fi. So if we're having issues with them accessing our property, maybe shut off the access to our free Wi-Fi for a period of time. Cap off any outside water and electrical that they might be able to utilize. Make sure that we have enhanced outdoor lighting in place. They're always looking for a dark place, maybe with overgrown landscaping that is a nice dark place for them to sleep throughout the night. So, making sure that we're making some adjustments or modifications to our landscaping. Post signage regarding loitering. Different cities and states have, we do see differences in the laws regarding loitering. So make sure that you're familiar with your specific laws in your area and post signage regarding loitering on the property. If you have outdoor seating and you're starting to have an issue with people accessing that area, using it that are not patrons of the business, remove those outdoor tables and chairs for a period of time. And then ask one of our community policing officers to come out and maybe do an assessment to identify areas that the transient or homeless might find appealing about your property. So again, we're just trying to deter and discourage them wanting to spend time on our property. So a couple of other things about, crime policies and procedures. We've talked a lot about training our employees. We need to have clear policies and procedures regarding employee conduct, have those expectations. If we don't have written expectations that we've communicated to our employees, it's very difficult to hold them accountable for situations. So make sure that we have everything outlined in a policy or an SOP, including have a zero tolerance policies for theft. If we had more time, I would go into explaining, over the years, we've seen some, pretty serious issues come up with some of our clients. And so we've seen a lot in the amount of time that we've been doing this. And I would love to share more of that information to help you guys put some safeguards in place. But cash handling is a big part of it. Individuals are not going to find us attractive if they know they're not going to have access to a significant amount of cash. Make sure that we're doing regular inventory audits to help reduce the potential for inside theft. Utilize our POS system or whatever to be able to track and audit our inventory within our establishments. Have security procedures established. And it's always a good idea to have a whistleblower policy in place. This is something that we're seeing more frequently. And if you were to go on OSHA's website, they're going to have tons and tons of information about whistleblower protection and making sure that employers have some kind of protection in place for those individuals that are reporting incidents to us that maybe need to be addressed or taken care of. Having an incident or accident investigation process in place, make sure that we have a follow-up system or response protocols established, and then communicate that we have handled those situations, that we've made changes to our system, to employ training to address some of the incidents that may have taken place within our facilities. So part of this whole crime segment also deals with making sure that you have protocols in place and sufficient insurance to protect your business. So I'm going to let Melissa kind of take over from here because that's her area of expertise.
Thanks, Renee. We are getting down towards the end of time. So just the last part of this is just kind of how insurance is involved with everything. And right now we are seeing where a lot of hospitality business owners are moving towards, third-party contracts, which kind of shifts the liability onto somebody else. One thing that I love about IMA Parker Smith and Feek is that for our clients, one of our value-added services is contract review. So we are going through those contracts, making sure the proper indemnification clauses and risk transfer clauses are in those contracts to help better protect you. And then obviously a lot of people really are unaware of what their current policy may cover. And so if you have questions about that, a lot of times there is some coverages, included in your property and casualty. Sometimes, depending on, what your property has or doesn't have, a more robust crime policy is needed. And again, we touched on a few things, but obviously crime can fall under cyber and a few other things. But if you are curious about exactly what you currently have and you need somebody to review it or make any sort of recommendations, feel free to reach out. And again, as they mentioned, that Renee and Trenton are a huge resource for us. Our clients rely on them a lot. It is another one of our value-added services, but we are here to be a resource. So if there's anything that we can do, feel free to reach out. And then if there is something more specific that you wanted as far as like on-site evaluations, they are capable of doing that for non-clients as well on a fee basis. Again, everything, we're here to help in any way possible. So we can, if you want a copy of this information, feel free to reach out to Logan or myself, and we will make sure to get it over to you.
One thing I want to throw in really quick related to the contract review is for those hospitality businesses that lease their property and don't own it, we can review lease agreements as well with our in-house attorneys, just to make sure that you're not left exposed or have some type of liability that you weren't expecting that is contained in that lease. So that's another value add that we have available to our clients.
And negotiate. So a lot of times, as you know, it all comes down to negotiation. So we did just negotiate for one of my clients, added security because they were having problems with auto break-ins. And so it just comes down sometimes to asking the question and working it out. So anything we can do to help support you, like I said, feel free to reach out.
All right. Thank you all so much for all this great information. Again, this has been recorded. It will be on our website and our YouTube channel later today. And if you're interested in getting a copy of the slides or information about the virtual security guard, please email. I'll include the email addresses that you need, and you can reach out and get that information. And once again, thank you all for attending, and thank you for this great webinar.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Have a great day, everyone.